Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Wednesday, June 26th, and coming up we will be covering all the major video game news and all the minor video game news and all the games that came out on Steam in the past couple of days. To start off with, though, I will want to talk about the issue, I guess, to start with here as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! In that I'm not really playing much of it, and I am successfully, very slowly, convincing myself to stop starting these streams with this warm-up section. I have 7 days, and you can see it's gone red because I have not gotten to the 100% point here for the gold pass, which this is the first time I've ever been in that situation. Up until this point, I have always gotten it to where it needs to go. I have no reason to play the special regulation rules, so I'll just play ranked in hopes that in playing ranked, I can just get to the gold pass up. So I was expecting today to start off somewhat later because I was planning on actually just going to the museum, to a museum presentation as just a special thing, but in some weirdness there, a different minor and medium emergency happened last night, and I ended up having to drive to a hospital and basically just pick someone up, and so it wasn't that big of a deal, but it potentially could have been a big deal. Certainly there was definitely an issue there, so that has taken up a lot of my time that I should have been spending otherwise. I should have been spending making pre-recorded footage, or particularly I should have been scheduling pre-recorded footage. In some of that, I've been trying to reinstall SteamOS on my Steam Deck for two reasons. One, there is a Cryo Utilities mod. I don't think I recommend it for the OLED version or even LCD versions. Inherently, I think Valve is updating SteamOS so much, and that they just kind of need that tight control to learn in their own backyard how to make a more robust operating system before we get to a point where it is like other Linuxes, where tweaking is actually more viable. Like, inherently, the lockdown nature of SteamOS compared to other Linux things is going to cause just a lot of problems and bugs. And in particular, I think by expanding my swap file, which I think by default the Cryo Utilities engineer programmer should have just submitted a issue with SteamOS and said, why don't you just run a script here to increase the swap file, because I do think the swap file is too small. But by changing it, it seems like Linux, or this version of Linux at least, uses the swap file as the hibernation file, whereas in Windows there is a pagefile.sys on your C drive usually, and a hibernate.sys, two separate very large files. Arguably maybe you don't need them both, and maybe Linux has just figured that out more, but there's something about how the bootloader after the BIOS, which used to be called Grub, actually Grub 2, but it still was mostly referred to as Grub. It's like GNU Linux or GNU recovery unified bootloader or something like that is what it stands for. There's something in that where you have to point to the swap file to resume from hibernation, and by changing it, maybe you have to tell the exact size of the file too, and by changing it something went wrong there. Frankly, it shouldn't even be a file. It should just be a swap partition, which is the recommended way in almost all Linuxes, is to just have a swap partition, and yet it's a swap file for no good reason. It's not even like you could resize. They obviously don't want you to resize it or delete it, so just have it as a partition makes more sense. But yeah, by changing that, I think I broke hibernation on my Steam Deck, which is possibly the reason why my Steam Deck is losing 10% of its battery even in sleep mode. So you would think that that would be a fairly easy process. Download a recovery image, put it on a USB thumb drive. Now inherently, a USB thumb drive is more than likely going to be USB Type A plug, so then you have to have a Type A to Type USB-C adapter, which even as somebody who's a nerd who has a lot of adapters, I really only have 2 USB-A to USB-C adapters in my house, and one of which I don't even know where it is. It's probably, if I was to guess, come to think about it, it's probably in a bag of other USB adapters that is actually in my pocket of my day-to-day jeans I usually wear. My everyday carry pouch, as it were. Well, lost there. But yeah, that's not working well either, frankly. The recommended image writing software is not the one I used the first time, and so it didn't work. The second time I used the recommended image writing software, I'm having network issues today also with Yu-Gi-Oh! Am I having network issues with anything else? No, not really. But yeah, the second time I've done it, it didn't work, and I thought maybe it was because I had the micro SD card installed, and the micro SD card has potentially some Linux partitions on it also, from because it's still got an old RetroPie installed on it. Well, geez, we may not play any Yu-Gi-Oh! Today at all, at this rate. We'll give it one more try, and then I'm just going to go straight into the news, just by force. I thought, because I was updating the Steam Deck, which that's what the end of this question is going to be, the story is going to be, is that there is a new update that looks like it's applying, although also, as it's trying to apply it, is also going to sleep. And you would think they would be smarter about that and not have the sleep function enabled when you're trying to apply and install a update to the Steam beta client in the Steam OS, which is about the same thing. Alright, well, I'm giving up on Yu-Gi-Oh! For now. We'll just have it run in the background for audio. Speaking of audio, I did experiment in the last stream with a multi-track audio in which just the video game music, which doesn't make a lot of sense in these live streams at all, but just the video game music would have been in track 6, whereas my voice and all of the combined audio would be in track 1. I uploaded that to YouTube. YouTube did not show any multi-audio track options as far as I could find it, and then when I downloaded the video from YouTube, there was no multi-audio track options in the downloaded version from YouTube of the video that was uploaded, because it changes everything there. Now, in that case, I skipped over track 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now I'm going to do one more experiment and try track 1, 2, and 3 and see if maybe it just processes tracks in a linear fashion first and stops as soon as it hits a number that doesn't have an audio track in it. This multi-track idea would be helpful, certainly. If YouTube saves that information. It's probably just a waste of time otherwise. In a more professional setup, if I had my own personal backups, it's a genius idea to keep all the different audio tracks separated, to the point where what you really would like to do is have some live, say, Spanish speaker sitting in the room, or sitting in a room across, sitting in a different room on the other side of a wall, live translating what you are saying, and then there could be multiple translations being applied and mixed appropriately over the game audio. Or if you had several different sources that isn't just a combined game audio. Now, it's not going to get deep into the core of the game, so it's not going to be a case where you can separate out the music in a game versus the sound effects in a game versus the ambient noise effects or voice effects. All of that is mixed down into one track when served to Windows, unless it was done in some very weird surround sound way, and I don't think any game is ever going to do that. That being said, one of the big bits of news here is that Steam has taken a step to do something very much like what OBS does, just having it integrated directly into the Steam client itself, where you can now use Steam with this in the beta to record your gameplay footage, clip and save and share it with friends. Inherently, they, I assume, are trying to push all of these videos to be on your Steam profile and on Steam servers, and not just being shared, say, to YouTube or Twitch or anything like that. Streaming is not mentioned here at all. It's just recording. That being said, the integration here is going to open up the door of an advanced programmable interface where the games themselves are going to mark clips for you and mark where the start of clips are and what the ends of clips are. There's been some of that, particularly in Sony games we know of, in that there are Square Enix games that have sections, and there's a few games that have the entirety of the game marked in such a way that you cannot make a clip or record the content during cutscenes, during times when the music might be playing. It's been 100% negative on the Sony side so far. So Valve at least is turning it into a positive. So if you're getting, say, a headshot in a first-person shooter, a game like Counter-Strike 2 probably will be the first one to do this, will mark probably 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after that headshot. If your character is dying and you didn't see how you died, that would get marked. Inherently, it would be nice if all games just had an automatic kill camera replay concept in it, but yeah, there was plenty of times when I was playing Fallout New Vegas where you step on booby trap or a grenade or a mine and you die and you just have very little clue as to what actually killed you until the kill cam, which is built into it, like shows you. But here you can see there's these little markers. Otherwise, the other news here is that the amount of controller support on Steam has tripled since 2018. The daily average controller use has gone from approximately 5% to 15%. This is all happening before the Steam sale, with the vast majority of those still being Xbox controllers. But there is a growing number here of PlayStation controller support in games on PC and Steam Deck controller support, which Steam Deck controller support in particular is mostly just emulating an Xbox controller as far as the inputs and such. The only difference is going to just be the prompts you see and what the user interface help menu is going to show you. Whereas PlayStation controllers are harder to integrate and their button layout is much more different. And see, there's definitely a split here that is going to have to be addressed, in that I do believe there is going to be a very large next generation of kids who have grown up playing on PlayStation controllers and are going to expect PlayStation controller support if and when they get older and start playing PC gaming. Whereas right now, it is very much a case where Xbox controllers are just slightly cheaper than PlayStation controllers, and they're designed well enough, if you get an official Xbox controller, that they work really well with Windows and such. And inherently, there is a generation past the PlayStation controller generation that might happen where Steam Deck controllers are just expected to be the default. Although Steam Deck controllers can't be very high, because at a certain point, if Steam Deck controllers were 100% of all the controllers being played, that would just mean PC gaming has effectively died outside of playing on something like a Steam Deck, which I don't want to see that happen. There should still be room for people who want to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on a gaming PC and play games on it, and not just forcing everybody into, relatively speaking, weaker portable devices. But yeah, Steam Deck controllers are going to appeal to that younger, newer generation that are used to playing on the Switch and maybe like the Switch controllers, although I'm not sure how many fans there really are of Switch. Steam Deck has gyro aiming, and otherwise just continuing to increase support, increasing options. The touchpads in particular on the Steam Deck still aren't something that I think have been integrated into any game other than maybe Aperture Desk Job. So unless we start seeing a demand for touchpads on Xbox and PlayStation controllers, or more games just using touchpads when they're available, I imagine they are going to be replacements for the mouse way more than they are going to be replacements for anything or additions to controllers. They've made a whole separate game recording website here to highlight it, and you can see in the beta it's a newly built-in system for creating and sharing gameplay footage where you can record, replay, and clip. I would heavily suspect, and see, this is just the messenger interface that you're showing the videos from. I would heavily suspect that this technology is based off technology that already exists as part of the VAC band system, in that you would more than likely already have signed away any privacy rights when playing something like Counter-Strike Go that would prevent them from having video footage and watching you play to see if you were cheating or not. So I wouldn't be surprised if most games have some kind of customer service feedback video thing that happens. I know I worked on with a software. I did not work on the software. It was terrible and very, very old. And even in the setup and the way that software had been designed and the operating system running the software had been designed, there was a way to see and spy on what the person who I was trying to assist was doing, and it was a very terrible experience and ridiculous in that it was somebody trying to simply type in like the word February. You had to type in the name of the month to make a backup for that month. No good reason why that is the case. It's just an insanely poorly programmed check in the first place. And so we went through that step over the phone multiple times, and finally somebody told me about this spyware effectively that they had installed on the corporate offices computers. And so we watched them type in February, and they misspelled February, and they would just consistently did not know how to spell February. And the software, I mean, yes, that's bad on the user, but it's not unexpected. The software just doesn't do anything when you type the wrong thing. It doesn't give an error message or warning or anything like that. So what should have been like a 5-second, oh, I misspelled it, let me go look up how to spell this correctly, where they wouldn't have had to call for customer service or internal IT service. It turned it from a 5-second issue to what was about a week issue of calling and taking phone calls back to back and playing phone tag. And finally, when we figured it out, it was really like 2 or 3 hours of just trying to figure out what was going on. So just like a huge waste of time just because bad programming existed. Anyways, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about now, just a little side story. So yeah, you can record. It is a background recording mode from what I just saw. This is all very new. There's an on-demand recording mode with manual start and stop, but mostly you just set it up for how much room you're willing to dedicate on your hard drive, and then it is just always recording and always deleting the oldest footage and always keeping the most recent footage. It might be a lot less useful if you're playing a whole bunch of games and jumping around. Rewinding to see a replay is nowhere as good as like rewinding in emulation, but it's still very useful. Like, and coming from OBS, yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that is like, this screen is a post recording setup. So OBS doesn't really have any of this as far as jumping back, jumping forward, replaying, zooming in to scroll through a bar. Definitely doesn't have any marker. You could drop markers and you could program a way to drop markers. Certainly I've done that, but all of this would have to be edited after the fact in a completely different software than OBS. OBS does not have a background recording mode, and inherently OBS is just not going to be as integrated into the Steam. So Valve has the potential here to program background recording to use a lot less resources than what OBS could do. Although on the other hand, OBS might be more open source, and so it might be more efficient than the 2 or 3 people working on this program in Valve. Clipping and then sharing. OBS doesn't have any direct sharing other than streaming functions. Inherently, you also see why there's a need for this now that there's just this inconsistency as far as people don't want to have you sharing to Twitter for one reason, or TikTok for another reason, or maybe Facebook for another reason. So Valve seems like they want to kind of own a big portion of that as far as what you could share to and what they're going to push you to share to, instead of saving it. But also, you can send footage from like your Steam Deck to your PC, and so that's definitely where they're thinking. This totally changes the setup in a much better way as far as what I was thinking I was going to have to do if I was ever going to play a game on my Steam Deck and try and record it on my computer. Before, the easiest way would have been to have a USB-C to HDMI out on the Steam Deck and playing it that way. Now it seems like you can just play. Now, I'm not 100% sure, though, that this is accounting for audio input. And I have no idea what the experience really would be as far as getting audio input out of a Steam Deck. Can you really sound decent enough talking to a Steam Deck if you're in a quiet enough room that is certainly a question. And it would be a real issue, because here, at the risk of totally screwing up this stream, let me just highlight something as far as what the audio sounds like out of my microphone, which has a pop filter in front of it. It's a Blue Yeti microphone, and it has a soundproof foam all around the back of it. But let me turn off the noise suppression for a second here and just let you hear the difference, and I'll go quiet as far as just how much noise is in my room, just because I have an air conditioner going and a ceiling fan going. So I'm going to go quiet for a second. Here's with noise suppression on, and here's with noise suppression off. So hopefully that sounds completely different to you in the recording. Otherwise that was a pointless waste of time. But yeah, you're not going to get that. You just aren't going to get that effect, more than likely built in by default into the microphone on the Steam Deck. And you definitely aren't going to have pop filters and sound foam that keeps a lot of the audio from echoing from other directions. My microphone setup is definitely directed in such a way that it's only supposed to pick up the person who is right in front of the microphone talking directly into it, not any sounds from my computer on the other side of the room. But yeah, this idea of event markers being built into games sounds like genius. I hope game developers embrace it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's very little reason to embrace it. And certainly, I think it would be hard to mod it in. It wouldn't be incredibly hard, but it would be a matter of going into like every significant event function and calling the Steam recording API. I like the little icons, but the icons here clearly are not going to be consistent throughout the recording software. It's going to be a different icon for different games. Even pausing the game as an API call is something that's not integrated really into Steam, and honestly that would be probably more useful, particularly for the Steam Deck. If you knew that the game was paused, you should be able to, at that point, enable the Steam Deck to go to sleep and save some battery, turn the screen off, things like that. Whereas if you know the game is not paused, you should not let the screen go to sleep and turn off. Although it's only going to be in a few rare occasions that you're sitting and watching some kind of cutscene and not pressing some kind of button to prevent the screen from going off. But yeah, that certainly would be helpful too, if there was something like that. You can add player added markers, which when you start to think about how you're going to put in markers, that is going to mean some button somewhere is going to have to be dedicated to dropping a marker or some key combination in general. And I imagine 99% of the players, even ones that do use recordings, aren't going to use the markers that often. Whereas the game added automated markers would be a lot useful. You can see, it can tell if they use the API, whether you're in the menu or the lobby or playing. Although the animation here of being in the menu versus lobby looks almost exactly the same. This is only slightly brighter. And then it is just using icons. One of the parts here is that you can send an MP4 via Steam mobile app or a QR code, which does highlight that all of this footage is going to be uploaded, I think, to Valve's story or Valve servers, which that brings about an interesting question, certainly, as far as if you're using a mod that, say, takes off all the clothes of the ladies in Skyrim, very popular mods like that exist, then are you potentially getting in trouble with Valve because you've uploaded to their servers something close enough to porn that they don't like it? Frankly, there are probably bits of content in games, even unmodded on Steam, that Valve does not want videos uploaded to. This also highlights the lack of connectability of the Steam Deck. That is a problem that needs to be addressed, in that it's just not really reasonable these days to download things to a micro SD card, because phones don't have micro SD card slots for the most part anymore. Most people aren't going to be carrying around USB-C thumb drives to plug into a computer or a phone. And Bluetooth file transfer probably would work, but they just haven't programmed it to actually work that way. So there's no like direct Wi-Fi direct file transfer protocols that I think exist at all. So you are kind of bending over backwards here using Steam codes, which this would be making a QR code to on the screen of a Steam Deck that you would then point a phone to or something as a camera, which definitely also doesn't consider the fact that there might be some parents out there who have disabled cameras on their kids' phones. Although at that point, those kinds of parents, if they need to disable the cameras on phones, probably don't want their kids sharing video footage in the first place. There is a lot of room for abuse here, certainly. And this is definitely a dedicated editor designed first and foremost from the idea of the Steam Deck. And it certainly can't address the issue of the Steam Deck being at a weird resolution of like 1280 by 820, and so your footage is going to be in a weird resolution, and it doesn't really address the fact that the Steam Deck is not going to be the best graphics that you could possibly have. You're not going to have a 4090 in a Steam Deck. But yeah, and here's an example setting where you can say record 120 minutes rolling, always, the previous 2 hours in this case, at 12 megabits per second, which is the default of high, which is going to take 10 gigabytes of disk space, where it would be, you might want to bump up 12 megabits. 12 megabits isn't terrible, but if you went up to 15, 16, 18, it might be a little bit better as an option, although 12 megabits may be more than enough for that resolution. Notice also, this is not addressing any wireless screen sharing, which the Steam Deck could do that too, certainly. And even Steam has that ability to directly stream video at a fairly high delay, but they can do it with other Steam Link apps. But yeah, I wish it was a better, like, Chromecast or Apple equivalent to Chromecast, whatever Apple calls theirs. Mirrorcast, I think is what it's called. I wish that functionality worked on the Steam Deck just out of the box, and you did just have a share this to a TV so you can let your friends watch you play the games while you're playing, whereas this system doesn't really address that issue at all. Like, it's not realistic for a kid to be at a party playing on their Steam Deck, then recording a video for a while and then sending that video to their friends, who would then have to pull out their phones and watch it. That makes absolutely no sense if they're all in the same room at the same time. Let's see. It says you can access it in and out of games, which makes me wonder if you can record activity on the Steam Deck on desktop mode also, and whether you can well, no, it says record your games, not your desktop. Select which audio channels included footage is captured directly to your hard drive, and you choose what to share. I think there's probably a case when you click share, though, it gets uploaded. Unless they've got some system here where your Steam Deck is the server. It works with anything in general, although it may not work well with anything, even though they are claiming it's engineered for performance. And they say more in the works. Keep an eye out for updates, features including individualized game settings coming soon. Inherently, they are trying to get everybody to use the Steam betas clients more and more. They want more input, they want more feedback on that, and they are doing more with the client. And I will take new features like this any day over the fact that they haven't bothered to change the way Steam Store looks with the blue color theme. As far as game developers, the software development kit and the advanced programmable interface is available now. So this is where you can add an event and a state description and a game mode. Let's see. Will not capture your desktop or other programs. You can choose to include the audio from other programs such as voice chat programs. When recording and sharing, be respectful of others and abide by the Steam subscriber agreement and Steam online conduct rules. So yeah, recordings are on your hard drive. Steam is capturing the video and the timeline in the RAW format. If you like a video format MP4 on your gameplay, then you create a clip and export it. but no talk really as far as what happens if you share a clip that's inappropriate. Let's see, the developer documentation here is coming. It's probably going to be way too inside baseball. Yeah. There's a massive amount of extra words now when you start looking at it. But this does show us what the icons by default are going to be. And all of that. And let's see if we can see some example code. If the timeline is started, then it creates an event listener for survival round start, and then round end and heal success, and player incapacitation start. When you shut down, you stop the listener for all events. And then if the round starts, okay, here's the crux of it. What you do is you take the Steam timeline and then you point to something inside of the class of Steam timeline, I think is what the arrows here mean, and then you add a timeline event, which is an array of different things as far as information. So yeah, that's not too much code, but what you have to do certainly is for each possible occasion that's already been programmed in your game, you're going to have to add a line of code like this. This is effectively just one line between this point and this semicolon at the end. They've just broken it up, which you can do into multiple lines for easy reading. But yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if there is a significant number of game developers that don't ever touch their code and aren't going to change their code. But then new game developers could certainly program it. I would say also, I suspect that these event listeners here at the beginning are going to be are more examples than the way it really would be done, because I imagine you would have already programmed the event listeners and already acted on the event listeners otherwise, and this is really what you would just add to the existing code. So yeah, that's potentially some exciting new news as far as a new update goes. There is definitely a possibility on my Steam Deck though that I'll never actually be able to reinstall SteamOS. I don't feel like, in my experience, that the recovery setup and the safety there, if you do need to reinstall SteamOS, is quite great, and that there is too high of a chance that I'm just going to completely ruin my Steam Deck. And yeah, I don't want to have to take it apart and potentially try and write an image directly to the the NVMe storage. That may not even work if I tried that. But yeah, the recovery is not rock solid in my experience, and I think in a big part that is because they are moving fast and breaking things with newer updates to this Steam beta. I may very well just have to factory reset my Steam Deck and lose all of the home settings and files I've made. Well, I'd back them up first before I'm able to reinstall the operating system. My macro is broken. UI Vision and Firefox is broken. Weirdly, this is all breaking right when Chrome has introduced their new limitations on extensions. So I don't believe Firefox is based off Chromium or Chrome in any way, but weirdly I am also still having trouble. So all of my news is out of order completely. I'll go ahead and click retry here. Let's see if we can actually jump into a game. Although I really don't have time for that. iOS ports of Resident Evil 4, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and Death Stranding sold poorly. An estimate suggests, this is from Video Games Chronicle, high-end Apple device owners don't appear to be rushing to buy AAA games. I am not surprised by that at all. App figures saying RE4 got like 7,000 units sold, and App Magic estimates 15,000 units sold. Those are all incredibly low numbers. Well, that's the estimated number of players who purchased the full price version on each operating system. Yeah. And certainly that makes a lot of sense to me. There's no way you were going to have a built-in audience that wanted to buy AAA games at a AAA price on iOS. Because, well, people who do use iOS devices are willing to pay a premium, they are not willing to play games so much or pay a premium for games. Notably, Fortnite being a major success on the iPhone happened in part because Fortnite is not a super expensive to get into game, and that's true for most mobile games on most platforms. Amazon Prime Day, by the way, is coming July 16th and 7th of Prime Day, but then they also have another sale, and sometimes I think they call them both Prime Days. They used to call them both Prime Days, but I think they changed the name on one of them. And one of the things I'm keeping an eye out on is a new Samsung Android phone, and Samsung is about to announce in just a couple of days their new lineup that would come out around January. So their announcements are always just like in the worst timing positions. But yeah, also I probably was not in the market to buy a S25 Ultra or S26 Ultra. But yeah, I am very much at the point where as long as you're getting an S series that has a decent processor, or a phone that just has a decent processor and a decent battery, that's all you really need. You do need to probably have 8 gigabytes or at least 6 gigabytes of RAM too, but there isn't too long of a list otherwise as far as things that phones need. We haven't hit a point, unfortunately, where the QI2 magnetic MagSafe connectors for Android are going to start being a thing. There are chargers now that support the Key 2 standard, but there are no phones that I know of that support it other than iPhones with the MagSafe technology, which is close enough. But yeah, I'm keeping an eye on that. And outside of the magnetic safe, Q2 standard, easily replaceable batteries still have not been implemented, where I thought the European Union was going to actually force phone companies to actually support that, and they seem to not be doing it very fast. And in a weird case, I kind of would like a folding phone, but that's a really big premium and probably a loss on battery life just to have a Samsung folding phone, which is not really what most people need. The screen, if you get a folding phone, is still not going to be that big when unfolded, and it might even be smaller overall. So I think bar phones probably are what most people should have. And honestly, if the Q2 standard and just better battery life and better processors were all addressed, phones really have hit a level where they're almost perfect. They're definitely good enough. I think I am like 3 generations behind on the Samsungs already. If it weren't for the fact that the battery is shot and that it doesn't last as long as it used to, I would be more than happy with the phone I have at the moment. So yeah, that's one of the things I'll be looking for to see if it actually goes on sale during Prime Day. The sales on Prime Day generally not that useful or that good in the first place. I don't know why I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh now, but whatever. The original 1997 PC ports of Resident Evil 1 is now on Good Old Games, and 2 and 3 are coming soon. We did see rumors that the original Resident Evil 1 was going to get re-released for sale and had been rated. There's, I guess, a question now to ask as far as whether or not it is going to come onto Steam or not, or whether this was all just a lot of extra work to be a Good Old Games exclusive. There is certainly something to be said to owning the original Resident Evil if you want to see those live action cutscenes and just want to experience the 1996 PC port version. But that is very much going to be for the historians out there, not for your average gamer. There's a similar thing where there might be a version of Resident Evil 4 that you would prefer to play other than just the remake, but more than likely it is just the most recent non-remake version is ideal for most people, and then the remake is its own separate experience. It does highlight, certainly, that they're not afraid of comparisons for such old games, but there's really no reason why you should be afraid of comparisons. Like, take note here, Capcom has actively delayed the timing here, so it is in a situation where these original ports were released before the remakes, or anywhere near the remakes. This is definitely a case where they have squeezed as much money as they think they can get out of the Resident Evil remakes, and they are just now trying to get some older cash flow for the older games. And it still runs into that weirdness in that the remake for the original Resident Evil is just not on the current engine and still feels like a fairly old game, whereas Resident Evil 2 and 3 are remade from basically from the scratch and feel like new games. They are definitely George Lucas remaster type experiences where a lot of things have been changed. And notably, it's kind of interesting how nobody complained about that either. A big part there, I guess, is the fact that accessibility to get the original Star Wars movies, the ones that aired in the theatrical versions, is almost zero, whereas having a copy of Resident Evil 1 even before it was available now on Good Old Games was very doable. There almost certainly are torrents and pirated ways that you could have gotten it if you wanted it that have been seeded and uploaded years ago and are still available. The Epic Games Store is having an Epic Savings event from the 13th to the 27th to compete against the Steam sale, and it seems like they've taken on this green theme, which seems very different from their more black theme. But what really caught my eye is that apparently Blood Bowl has seasons, Blood Bowl 3 has seasons, and it has introduced a whole new team of ghosts and monsters, which didn't realize that Blood Bowl was a seasonal game as service. And then eventually we immediately get into the negative news as far as Perfect World has cut staff and multiple unit layoffs, reportedly suspending game projects. Hazel Light's game, A Way Out, has sold over 9 million copies since 2018, although this really is a great example of just a company either having nothing else to say or just being really good at promoting its old content, or perhaps being obsessive and not letting go of old content. 9 million is a round number, so it's probably worth mentioning, but when you're talking a 6-year-old game, it's just not really relevant. And this is another game like It Takes Two, which is more recent, where you needed 2 players to play, and particularly in A Way Out, not No Way Out, you are seeing different footage depending on which character you're playing as in a mandatory co-op experience. So it's once again a game that's just impossible for single content creators like me to play. I know I saw some content creators were capable of bringing in somebody else to co-op and play with them, but the coverage was very light. It's also a very narrative game in the first place. This one's just allowed to attack multiple times. I'm not even really sure what I'm trying to do here. I'm not sure what it takes to really get this up, but if that's any indication, there's just no way I'm going to play enough to get that grade up. I need hundreds of XP, it seems. I didn't realize by just reducing the amount I play by a quarter that would have had that big of an impact. That does tell me that I was even previously only doing a little bit more than was necessary to finish the 90-day Games Pass, Gold Pass. And even if I don't get all the rewards, it doesn't really change anything. I'll probably still get the gold pass next time when the new one comes in and just drain my gems a little. I am high enough in the gold pass where I've gotten all the important rewards. It's always been a case where the amount of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I wanted to play is completely misaligned with the amount of Yu-Gi-Oh! That Yu-Gi-Oh! Wants me to play, Capcom wants me to play. Netflix is taking a mobile-first phased approach to game releases, according to GameDeveloper.com. I think we had probably already figured that out or already been told that. That is not surprising. Netflix is dipping its toes into gaming, has really only highlighted that it's a tough thing to break into, particularly if you are focusing on mobile gaming. Yeah, my macro today ran very poorly, and that's why I started in part so late, as I attempted to run it multiple times and it never did quite work, and then I manually just had to open up all the tabs. And that takes, let's just estimate, an extra hour for that alone. There probably is a better way, a better deck to play that would just let you do more things to get more XP. But I kind of feel like the most XP when playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Is from just winning. This is all the full action you have to do. So much clicking, so much work. Let's see, if this was a one turn that I could attack, this would be a one turn kill, but it isn't. So I'm threatening a one turn kill. The question is, now that we let the second player play, can he actually do anything? A cinematic horror virtual reality rescue mission game called Deep Cuts has been announced for PSVR 2, Steam VR, and Quest. We're still getting an occasional horror game. I mean, VR game being announced. It is definitely not a case of occasionality when it comes to horror games. We get that all the time. We'll see him if he can activate his effect. If he's gonna do that. Here we have GameDeveloper.com talking about what I talked about earlier as far as Steam's average game controller use triples to 15%. This is from when they started really taking metrics there in 2018. And it says that the controller landscape has changed, which I definitely would agree to that also. But we are in a different setup now than we were just even a few years ago as far as using controllers on PC. And I will admit, I just don't fully understand what a mouse and keyboard gamer would really love about that. Yeah, there's still, I imagine, some games where it makes a lot of sense. But, yeah. So that one victory bumped me up. It means I need to play off screen, like, for 15 more victories. So I am short 15 victories. That is assuming that one victory can always get me around 4,900 points. And in the end, with the default rewards for doing all of this is just one legacy pack of cards, which just doesn't really matter at all. And then, as far as like daily quests, we still have one thing to do. And then the daily login. This highlights just how little I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Off screen too, which is basically none. But I seemingly barely logged in every time I live streamed. Yep. And then the lifetime missions. At this level of momentum, I'll probably never get most of those done. Meanwhile, while I can blame a lot of this on the fact that I'm just playing less Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Has also done a very poor job in the 2.5 years that it's existed, as far as Master Duels existed, to keep players coming back and playing, to give them something new and interesting to do. These events are more time wasters and fairly repetitive. The solo stuff has no connection to any of the other gameplay mechanics, and there just isn't a fast way to play. They should integrate that Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush gameplay rule set into Master Duel. But I bet they try to sell you a whole different game for Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush. But if you could play Rush, then you could play a lot faster. If they made their own rule set that was just faster, that could work too. At a certain point, I almost would prefer just playing like War with Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. Just flip over a card and see who has the highest attack. Something like that. Anyways, back to news. I can't really stand to cover the news and play at the same time. The Gamescom Latam is happening, I think, right about now, or has happened. So in Friday's stream, we'll probably have some more news around what gets announced. I imagine there isn't going to be too many new games announced, but we may just have more footage and trailers of existing announced games. Elden Ring, despite the fact that some of the developers, I think the director in particular, said that the game was supposed to be hard and that it would ruin the game if they made it easier. Well, they have made the DLC Shadow of the Erdtree, which I believe is the DLC. They've added an update to make it easier. The patch addresses complaints from some players about the DLC's difficulty. So yeah, they're definitely not willing to die on the sword of making the game difficult. And at a certain point, there should be a meeting where somebody says the director should not go out and publicly speak and say it would ruin the game to make the game easier, because then it makes the very awkward situation they are now in that they've made the game easier and it probably hasn't ruined the game. There clearly is at least a knee-jerk desire for difficulty in video games still, but I'm not sure that that desire is high enough in the majority of players that it should really be addressed or satiated, because when you really think about it, we are still very much in the case where the average gamer does not make it to the credits of most games they purchase. And so until we get to a point where we've made games easy enough, or sticky enough at least, that players will stick to the game all the way to the credits, then we shouldn't make the games any more difficult than that. Games really should just be easy. Let user mods make games more difficult if they want, or probably embrace higher difficulties that unlock after the first playthrough as a concept. That's not something that we've seen a lot of in recent years, but it definitely was the case in the past. And nowadays, if you wanted to start on a very hard difficulty and it was locked behind the second playthrough, well, then you can just have people download save files to skip the first playthrough, or use a cheat code to unlock the very hard difficulty, or use a mod or something like that. Probably cheat code would be an interesting way to do that. But for your average player, put them in on easy. Don't even give them an option. Get them to that credits. Atari, or the company now known as Atari, that bought the rights to the name Atari, has acquired the Surgeon Simulator franchise through the Infogrames label, which, okay. Surgeon Simulator was a basically one note joke, however, and I don't think you can make a continuing series of Surgeon Simulator games that people would continue to want to play. It is also one of these YouTuber type games where it's silly for 5 minutes for a 5-minute YouTube game, but not interesting enough to really spend hours and hours playing. Weirdly, it has highlighted the problem in that now we can't have a proper Surgeon Simulator game called Surgeon Simulator that would actually simulate doing real surgery. Here's me working on the Steam Deck recovery instructions, and yeah, I definitely feel like it's weird that they're recommending this Rufus utility and you probably should use it, and then there's a whole thing to get to the boot menu. You have to shut down your Steam Deck, and then you have to hold down the volume down and buttons until it does a tiny, very quiet beep, and then it will go into the boot select menu. And then if you can get this far, which I'm not getting this far, you will get into a recovery environment that would let you re-image, which is just full factory reset. This would be what you would do if you were giving it away to somebody, some stranger, or you could just erase and format your home partition, which would get rid of all of your home data, which is probably almost the same thing as re-imaging. Or you can just reinstall the operating system, which is what I'm trying to do. Or you can open a prompt to talk to make changes to the boot partition. And I haven't gotten this far to see these options at all. One of the things is the latest recovery image here may be fairly old. For all the tinkerers out there, please note that this system image is not quite SteamOS 3 yet, depending on what you're trying to install on desktop, another handheld, refrigerator, toaster. It may not work properly. SteamOS 3 proper will be coming out sometime after launch, and even then it may not work on your toaster. So this might also be a old support page that is not the right recovery support image, which would explain why it's not working for me. So I definitely need to do some more research on that. Suffice it to say, it's not, they didn't put a big warning on the page. Let's see. While I'm here on my Steam Deck and it's right next to me, let me see what it says the OS build is. Yeah, the OS version on the Steam Deck is 3.5.19. So that image isn't working because of the fact that it is for SteamOS 2, and there was significant changes between the major number 2 and the major number 3. Well, on SteamDB here we can see, and I'm just going through all of this out of order, I know. We can see Banana is trending downward now in the peak 24-hour players, and we're starting to see more of the staples of PUBG and Dota move back up to the top. And this source engine could be that new Valve game that's rumored. Was it Dreadlock, something like that? Chained Together has shot up very high to the 14th spot. So that is a new trending game. Cat is in the 27th spot. It sucks that how many of these trending games are just clicker garbage games. Dark and Darker might be a newer one. Space War. Publisher Telltale Games. Release date unknown. Well, this is interesting. This is either somebody lies about the publisher being Telltale Games, or there is some Telltale Games called Space War that is in a very large beta that's had an all-time peak of 100,000 players. Well, that's interesting. Fallout 4 is down to the 46th spot. And I imagine we'll just see Fallout 4 very slowly trickle down because it's just such a long game. And this highlights where long games, sticky games like poker games where you're just going to play it always, or sticky games like Left 4 Dead 2 and that you're going to play it always if you really like it, stay on the lists for a very long time. Whereas a short single player experience is still likely to at best pop up into the top 100 for a week or two and then disappear. Skyrim is in the 76th position. This Chinese mahjong game is in the 72nd spot. OBS is in the 89th spot. It'll be interesting to see if OBS starts to fall downward now that the Steam beta is going to effectively, well, the phrase that a lot of people call it is Sherlocking, in that one company sees that another company has features, or and they just integrate those features into the main program without really paying or crediting the people who may have originally thought up the idea, or using any of the code of the people who made up the original version of it. Although open source software kind of doesn't really care about that. In the case of OBS, if Valve did just completely fork OBS as source code and integrate it into the Steam client, that's not really a problem. It's only a problem really if OBS was a for-profit company that was selling OBS to people, which they aren't. And Streamlabs is kind of doing that. And then Valve came in and ate the lunch and ate all the potential profits of a company. But also, people would call that capitalism and say capitalistic competition is good. Of course, that's not what business owners want. They don't want capitalism, they want protectionism. They want their business to be protected and their profits to be protected. They don't want other companies to be able to copy them. And inherently, that's where most copyright law comes from, is how can I get the government to protect my interests while disenfranchising anybody else in the process? Who cares? Stellar Blades sold, sales have topped 1 million. A photo mode update is due out in August. I question whether anybody will really be playing around that. And then they have they are potentially thinking about a PC version if they can get out from Sony as the publisher. That's inherently the issue here, is that we have no idea whether Stellar Blade needs to sell 1 million units or 10 million units or 50 million units to make enough money to have the rights of Stellar Blade completely revert back to Shift Up, who could then possibly find a different publisher, because we know it's not really going to be Sony, not likely at least, that would fund them to make a PC port, because they can't likely afford to just do it themselves. Meanwhile, they're probably just focusing on the next update, downloadable content and sequels being planned. All my interstitial images here are going to be out of order too. And we've got duplicate tabs. Yeah, here we can see Apex Legends has got a big burst up. And Banana is still off the charts. Next week will be the July 4th week, I suppose. So there's some potential for game sales or more gameplay around there. Not really a lot to take from that. And I think I'm probably already running late anyways. There is a new Code Geass anime of some sort. I don't know if it is just re-airing or remaking the original Code Geass anime, or if it's expanding on that to some extent, but I did see something. It may have been a fan animation, but possibly not. It may be just a sequel thought to Code Geass. Now, what I definitely don't want to do is break my Steam Deck and then end up buying an LCD Steam Deck just because I broke it. If I'm going to buy an LCD Steam Deck, which I probably am not, I want it to be because I have two working ones and need two working ones. One to set up to give away effectively. I don't need to for my own personal use. And frankly, I probably would not buy another one just to fix that. See how Riven is being received very positively. I would probably just send the Steam Deck in for repair. I also wonder if maybe I need to flip on developer mode in the system settings, which I can still boot into the Steam Deck and everything. It's not broken, other than Hibernate not working. So I am really trying to learn and go through the process of reinstalling SteamOS. Spy vs. Anna coming to Steam. I'm not sure I really knew that. And then like the main new releases are just going to be here until the end of June, and then we'll have the June new releases, and none of that will probably even be highlighted during the summer sale. I do wonder if perhaps the reason the Steam Decks are being sold up until the summer sale and then the summer sale is stopping isn't so much because they may announce some new Steam Deck and that's the reason, or they're going to have a different sale for, say, the OLED versions instead of the cheaper, older LCD versions. I wonder if they have just made a promise to focus on software sales during the summer sales and promote the third-party publishers and developers instead of potentially eating up a significant amount of the money that could be spent. It may just be the new standard way in which they operate, in that the hardware Steam Decks will always go on sale a few weeks before a big summer sale type event happens on Steam. The studio that was co-founded by Dr. Disrespect cut ties with Dr. Disrespect. More evidence, or more allegations, I suppose we should say, has come out as far as it seems like it's generally been accepted by the people on Reddit who seem to actually care about Dr. Disrespect that he was using Twitch's Whispers private message function to inappropriately sexually chat with a minor who was like 17. And Twitch was spying or moderating, take your pick. Probably moderating is the right word. You probably agree to it in the terms of service, those private messages, and saw what was happening, and that's why Twitch stopped doing business with him and banned him. But yeah, in situations like this, the vast majority of people are not going to care or even know who Dr. Disrespect is. The hardcore fans and the anti-cancer culture people are going to support him no matter what, and then the more pro-cancel culture, or just people who are making what I would say is fairly reasonable evaluations of the situation, are probably not going to support him much. Now, at a certain point, regardless of who it is, if you like the content he makes and you like the job he was doing, then your enjoyment really shouldn't change there, and you should just keep on watching him. Yeah. The cancel culture idea of somebody should lose their job and the ability to get any other job, which is often the way it gets pushed into, just doesn't make any sense. If there was real criminal activity here and real charges were brought up, that would be a different thing, of putting him in jail and then losing his ability to have a job and things like that, while he is at least in jail. That'd be a different situation. But at a certain point, you're just painting somebody into more and more desperate situations. Maybe there's an argument that you shouldn't have such a public job, And perhaps there should be way more oversight in whatever job you have, that you're not feeling free to text minors. Unfortunately, anybody with even the smallest amount of celebrity seems to fall into these traps. And at a certain level, I could see myself joking around and joking inappropriately with somebody, finding out later that they were actually younger. That there definitely should be more training on Twitch's side and YouTube's side as far as here's the line you shouldn't cross between celebrities. You are immediately should consider yourself a celebrity under the microscope from day one, and here's things you really shouldn't do. There was a YouTuber who was habitually kind of getting sloshed and drunk during his live streams, and eventually got arrested for being caught doing, I think it was cocaine or drugs or something, while on his live stream. And it's just like, people don't think about it. Of course, yeah, people get into habits, and there just aren't a lot of people that know how to act right, or not a lot of people who tell people you're not acting right. And I would argue that if there was one inappropriate message with a minor, then it perhaps would have been better for Twitch to say, nope, don't do that ever again. This is your last warning. And yeah. And it does, in fairness to Dr. Disrespect, seem like after getting banned from Twitch, if all of this is true, there are no new accusations, so it does seem like he may have changed his actions, and that should probably be applauded too. Is that if he just said, you know what, I saw this as a yellow light to stop my actions and be more cautious in the future, and I have been more cautious in the future. This is very much old news, and it's not being brought up inherently by the alleged victim, even as far as I understand it. It's being brought up by allegedly people who worked at Twitch. Anyways, I've already spent way too much time talking about this story. This is a story that is not really relevant to most gamers and really shouldn't be reported on as much as it is being reported on, in my opinion. We talked about this in the last stream, that Second Wave developer folded amid missing wage payments and amassing $1.7 million in debt. This is way more of an important story and should be way more of a controversy, and these kinds of stories happen all the time. And although it's kind of rare to miss wage payments, it's not rare for companies to lay off people, and the controversy and outrage around that is much bigger and should be much bigger. It's affecting a lot more people, and it is done out of pure greed, not just stupidity. Let's see. We're just all over the place. I guess we'll just go ahead and go through all the new games on Steam now. Again, I manually had to go through all of the am I not logged in? This is going to take too long. Yeah, so I had to go through all of this manually to open all of these tabs. And certainly that is where it just slows me down. It does point out something that I should think about as far as can I make an emergency backup live stream if I had no video game news to talk about at all? Yeah. Putting some of these visual novels on the fall list just to see if they go anywhere. Here we have Beyond Good and Evil 20th anniversary, and we can see it is 69% positive. I assume that's not just for a meme. Let's see what the reviews are saying here. First and foremost, I could say at $19.99, a 20-year-old game is way too expensive. Third-party DRM, third-party Ubisoft accounts, third-party EULA is all a lot. One of the things these screenshots is doing a much better job of is highlighting how the actual action goes in this game, whereas most of the screenshots around Beyond Good and Evil 1 and 2 just don't really highlight what the actual game is, or they overemphasize what the photo mode was, or they overemphasize a cutscene section. Looks like there were some races in it. Some of this might be new content. Some of this might be stuff that I just missed. Let's see what the reviews are. I could have saved myself time by reading other reviews before purchase. Ubisoft Connect, why I will be returning. Not recommending until they fix the performance issues. Loving it so far, but why is the performance on a 4090 Ryzen 7950X worse than my Steam Deck? Needs optimization. Pass for PC bad. Oddly enough, runs gloriously on the small and mighty Steam Deck, which I wonder if we start to see more reviews that go that route, where there's just a lot of optimization put into making sure it runs on the Steam Deck and no effort put into actually making sure it runs on general computers, things that aren't using APUs and have dedicated GPUs and CPUs. Game keeps crashing in cutscenes. Ubisoft's launcher is absolutely unplayable. Whatever I do, I get there's a problem. Authentication, the ownership of this product, massive DRM nations. Ubisoft Connect, this means to say the game itself is bad, but I'm really tired of Ubisoft advertising games like they're on Steam when they're really just a launcher for their dumb app. Game crashes at the first loading screen when they launch it on Steam. Updated achievements. Come on. Says on the Steam description, but it doesn't have Steam achievements, not even Ubisoft Connect achievements. I'm so disappointed when I realized. They've added characters may be stereotypical. Ubisoft acknowledges the negative impact of this representation. I guess maybe that's a specific character. Secundo is maybe stereotypical. So suffice it to say, people are upset about several different issues here. And I suspect that this guy, not this guy, but this guy that's going to show up in a second here is Secundo. Yeah, the whole game 20 years later feels like you made a game based off of an old cartoon, and I'm a little surprised we don't have more games that are actually based off of old cartoons. You probably could make like a Transformers or Beast Wars video game that just took most of the animation and all of the plot lines from the old cartoons and made it into a simplistic video game. experience, even like a Telltale game. So, unfortunate, I would say, that is not being received better. But Ubisoft being Ubisoft, I guess, is the closest thing I can say there. It is probably an issue, certainly there, where I would like to see at some point Ubisoft make a major change. And I do think eventually it will happen. I think the CEO will eventually retire, and the next person in charge might do something very different. This is interesting. You have, I guess these are fairly different looking games. They felt like they were very similar back to Mac, which doesn't really mean anything unless it was the exact same developer. And even in that case, you have to be careful to look at the games before you start accusing them of asset flipping the same game multiple times. Street Boss looks like one of those YouTube ads, which is kind of crazy that there aren't more clones of those YouTube ads of games, but those YouTube ads themselves are almost universally deceptive. Now, I am noticing that I'm moving through this fairly quickly, and I'm not mentioning whether I'm making YouTube shorts on them and leaving the tabs open, or whether I'm going downward with my gestures and closing the tab. But that's really what is going to help is that Frog Gun Encore is getting received well. Yeah, so it may very well be a case going forward that people are just going to have to watch and see if I'm moving the mouse cursor to the left or right to move forward to the next tab, or whether I am swiping the mouse cursor from the top downward to close the tab. But you generally also can figure that if I am going over to the follow list like this and clicking follow, or even hovering over the follow, I am making a YouTube short on it. Here we can see Ribbon is being received very positively. Now, the problem with this and the irritation around this, though, is that the all-time peak has only been 1,712 players. As a single-player game, it's just never going to have that big of a fandom. And I guess I don't own the most recent version of Myst. So if I was going to catch up here, I would buy this at the higher discount to get Myst and Ribbon remakes, most recent remakes of the games. Now, I don't think this version has any new puzzles, so Ribbon having new puzzles also creates a weird situation. They probably should put out a patch and a new mode for this remake that does add some new puzzles. They are churning out games fairly quickly, though. This came out in 2021, August 26, 2021. This is June 25th, 2024, less than 4 years. Of course, they are churning out the same game, so it's no surprise that that's fairly easy to do, since you don't have to redo any of the writing. You kind of know what all the graphics are going to look like. I probably should do a fault list cleanup and consider what I want to do with card games in particular. This is a prologue, but I'm going to give it a chance anyways. But yeah, I have a lot of CCG type games. I doubt this one actually supports English. You can see it's mixed reviewed. It's all over the place in the visuals and the screenshots. But that was the wrong gesture. So I went back and did the right gesture. I'm still in a weird situation though, where I need to schedule videos. I need to be more productive overall and not get distracted. And I know that I am going to be distracted over the next couple of weeks still. And yeah, it's not really anything I can do about it. It's just a lot going on that have to trump making YouTube content for a YouTube channel that's not monetized. And on that aspect, I may be getting more views and things like that slowly, more subscribers, but I still would need about 3 times as much watch time as I have to be monetized, and roughly 130 more subscribers. So something big would have to happen. I'd have to have a breakout hit. Here we have 3D puzzle dash something from puzzle game developer in Haiti or Hade. And then we have 4D games after that. And then here we have another 3D puzzle. This is an example of them flooding Steam. And perhaps these games would have been good enough, but definitely not good enough for $119.99. This is obviously some ridiculous money laundering scam at the moment, or perhaps it is a Steam sale scam in which they're putting the game on sale in the hopes that it would be purchased during the summer sale. But I don't think you actually can do this. So if their plan was to have it marked up very high before July 11th, which is the summer sale, you can't put the game on sale again for like 30 days, I believe is the rules after that. So yeah, I don't know what they were thinking here, other than this is something that clearly Steam as a storefront should have red flags on. Any game over even $79 for the base game should be a red flag and something you look at as far as excessive pricing. And I imagine there are legal reasons why Valve can't say, no, you priced this game way too expensive, or we're going to remove it and stop doing business with you. But it should definitely be a red flag that they look at, and then they look at just how many games they've put and how they have a whole bundle here for what they're saying is 95% off for $310. Like, they literally would only have to sell one copy of this to get their Steam Direct funding back. And that's what they're going for, I imagine, is one idiot to click purchase. Yep, and then it would just be gravy for every other sale. Meanwhile, this is just incredibly unfair to people who are more legitimately playing, listing actual games and trying to compete in a marketplace that isn't flooded with absolute garbage, absolutely overpriced games. Yeah, unfortunately, day to day, there is way too many garbage games. But then there are garbage games, and then there are scam games, and in that case, it seems definitely to be a scam game, in my opinion. Here's one of these Japanese games. I've seen them talk about this, but this is probably not one that's ever going to come to the West as far as an English translation, because it's, I think, based off of a Japanese anime that hasn't come to the West, so really wouldn't make a lot of sense. I'm going to put that on the fault list just to keep an eye on it, but I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it. It doesn't really behoove me to make YouTube shorts on non-English content. Should I give this a chance? I'll give it a chance because there's just not that much competition of these style games. But yeah, if all my pre-recorded footage that I want people to see is going to be in English, then I shouldn't try and bring in an audience that wants me to speak in some different language. And inherently the YouTube shorts are not doing anything to push people to watch pre-recorded footage. Live stream video also not doing anything to push towards pre-recorded footage. Yeah. It is a ridiculous bait and switch system that YouTube is promoting, in that they want you to potentially become popular using YouTube shorts or live stream, but then they, to be successful financially, you're going to also have to get a lot of people to watch your videos multiple times or go back and watch old videos, and live and YouTube shorts are not likely to direct that. Guess I'll give this a chance. Yep. This lady has fairly large boobs, but I don't feel like this is just one of those ridiculous games where the ladies have way too large boobs. Although clearly there is an emphasis there in the screenshots. Yeah, I'm gonna say no to that. I don't think this is enough of a game. I can see that may be all of the games that came out on Steam. Let's go back to headlines at this point. I wish these were, I mean, I didn't know how good I had it before as far as just having the appropriate order of headlines. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 has taken 15 million players to the skies. This is old information. 59% of devs say the industry is in bad straits, blames investors and mismanagement. The online shooter Boundary has shut down as the dev and publisher are clashing over the rights. Which, yeah, you should definitely have more of a rock solid contract, but definitely seems to be happening more and more that publishers and developers are arguing over who has the rights to a game, which means that, yeah, it definitely is not a good situation when you have these kinds of contract disputes so publicly too. GameDeveloper.com here says there's an update that the Midnight Society co-founder Dr. Disrespect admits to messaging a minor on Twitch. Double Fine and Undead Lab veterans have launched an experimental web game studio. Their goal is to whip up small experimental prototypes at lightning speed. And apparently they're calling the company 2 weeks, which is way too overcommitting. Inherently, I imagine there is a lot of people at Double Fine that just, for one reason or another, are not getting satisfied as far as the amount of output they're making. Double Fine as a company seems to move slowly as far as making games, slower than I think Microsoft should really let them. But then this is also people that no longer work at Double Fine or Undead Labs, so it could be any random assortment of developers, which I am increasingly hating when new studios get formed and they just drop the names of the former companies they worked for, which I guess in an industry like video game development there's just no shame in doing that, because even if you were fired or laid off from a game company, you can easily explain it as just, well, all game companies are laying off everybody. There's very few people who have been publicly fired for some cause that they couldn't go and form a new company and get support. Let's see. Bandai Namco Online faces insolvency post Blue Protocol launch. I assume this is a LLC subsidiary of Bandai Namco. The publisher's live service and MMO specific studio was already losing money in 2023's launch, and Blue Protocol may have exacerbated the team's issues. I don't think that's particularly as uncommon as you might think in Japan, though. Shift Up predicts Stellar Blade sales surpassed 1 million copies. Playground Games will delist Forza Horizon 4 in December. These racing car games. That is something I feel like Tesla and Rivian could certainly do, is they could give out free 3D models of their cars to be used in video games, and then that would get them some extra coverage and advertisement. I don't know if it'd get them the actual new sales, but inherently the current status quo of having to license out the likenesses, and usually you get the 3D models from the car developers, is just consistently causing racing car games to be delisted after a few years, because the licenses agreement expires after a few years. Which, yeah, it would be nice if there was a copyright court case that said cars are too generic to really be copyrighted in their appearance. But there is certainly something special about using the likeness of a car as a way to advertise your video game, that being much more commercial than, say, using the likeness of a car in a news report or in a documentary where you're just being critical and describing the car. But yeah, meanwhile, gamers are suffering. Racing car games in particular not gaining a level of success or stability that it should have had decades ago. Scopely has added the Riot Games alum Mike Sievers as the Senior Vice President for Technology, according to GameDeveloper.com. Apparently an Xbox patent offers a first look at a scrapped Keystone streaming console. Microsoft killed its cloud-powered streaming device back in 2022, but the newly discovered patent gives an idea of what it could have been. Not really, though, because they intentionally draw all of the illustrations and descriptions and patents to be deceptive and wrong. That way nobody can see the patent submission forms and steal it. And inherently this is not too different from what the Xbox was eventually, the Xbox Series X. It's just that the Series X is much taller. But yeah. Eventually, Microsoft and Sony is going to be, if not 100% streaming, it's going to be mostly streaming, in the sense that the data will be streaming down to a hard drive and then the game will run off of a hard drive, which is usually called downloading, but it's going to be 100% digital. We're not going to have disk drives, I imagine. Yeah. But yeah, streaming games properly is still not really viable. People don't have fast enough internets, and it just doesn't have consistent frame pacing, and it probably never will. Let's see. Gamatsu says Minds Beneath Us launches July 31st. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, I am very much in the wrong position right now to even try to update my macro in any way, because anything new I do won't work until the old stuff works. Farming Simulator 25 has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. The good thing is with the gestures now, I can move around a lot quicker. Atari 50th, the anniversary celebration, expanded edition has been announced for all consoles and PC. So I believe this is going to include more games, or include downloadable games that are now just going to be on the disc. Let's School for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Switch launches July 16th. I assume this is a school simulator game. Yes, and it is overwhelmingly positive, which, yeah, on the look of it, I could kind of see that as far as running a simulator and running a school. I could see kids relating to that a lot more than running a city, which very few people actually engage with the totality of a city. A game called Draws for the Switch launches July 12th. It too is already on Steam. And it too is another one that I somehow have missed. Disney's Epic Mickey Rebrushed launches September 24th, which I'm in a very weird position if I do get this game, in that I would be playing it after playing Epic Mickey 2. But honestly, I think Epic Mickey 1 is probably better than Epic Mickey 2. And I guess this is an example of THQ Nordic at least being able to publish something, instead of everything from the Embracer Group companies being cancelled or not talked about at all. Project Locally has been officially titled Supervive, and an open beta is set for late 2024, which I don't recognize anything called Project Loki even, but I imagine we'll get more information about that game later. Let's see. Gamatsu has a interview here, AI limit interview with producer Yang Bin, story, world, gameplay, and more. AI limit, I assume, is an actual game. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely feels inspired by some of the other Japanese action games we've seen come up more recently. Stellar Blade being an example of one of those, but also Nier Automata being the first one, I think, to inspire those types of games. And that is potentially showing that there is a percentage of Japanese gamers that are moving away from the slow turn-based or even the slow team action-based RPGs that have existed up until this point into more action experiences. I would also say, while Monster Hunter is more of a different type of game, it is also very action-based too, and so we may start to see more players just shift towards faster-paced action in gaming from the Japanese audience, and we may start to see a divide widen between the Dragon Quest players who want the slower turn-based type of action, the slower, more traditional Japanese RPG games, and the more fast-paced hyper RPG games, which that might be a good term to use, as hyper RPGs. Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak 2 is coming to the West. Let's see, I would assume maybe for the PlayStation only, or maybe we don't know what. It says PC, PS4 and 5 and Switch. Release was apparently leaked by the PlayStation Network. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1855 are available here on Gematsu, giving Dragon Sakyo Ozukan Battle Coliseum a 27 out of 40, where Iwakura Aria for the Switch has 32 out of 40. I don't know either of those games. A much easier to pronounce Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is getting 32 out of 40. Decent scores, nothing amazing there. I don't think Luigi's Mansion 2 was particularly well liked, and it does seem like they have decided to just call it Luigi's Mansion 2 HD and not Luigi's Mansion New Moon or whatever else they were calling it. A game called Madison is 28 out of 40, and Run for the Money, The Great Mission, is 28 out of 40, which inherently it's a slow week based on the unrecognizability of most of these games. But it might also just be a case that even in a re-release of an old Nintendo game is such a threat to smaller games that they just try to stay away from releasing at the same time as a Nintendo game. And yeah, I definitely feel like Nintendo has done a decent job in announcing a bunch of games, but they still very much feel like they're just announcing and releasing a bunch of old games that they've probably been sitting on releasing. There are definitely some rumors that Nintendo may have several games like Metroid Prime 2 and 3 just completely finished and sitting on the shelf to be released, and they may now just be rushing to release all these games before the next Nintendo console comes out. It would be better for the game industry though if all companies had several games sitting on the shelf, and then it would just be a matter of like re-rendering the cutscenes to release it on a new console and make it look modernized. If Beyond Good and Evil 2 had been made like a couple years after Beyond Good and Evil 1, and they were just sitting on it for the right time, there would have been several points in which they could have released it. But yeah, I've never found a game company that is really good at making good content that is way too much content. Bethesda is perhaps the only company that's really good at making way too much content, but it's not particularly good content. Cyber Agent is going to acquire Nitro Plus. I don't recognize either one of these companies, though. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, Nitro Plus is engaged in content production in a wide range of genres, including games, animation, novels, and illustrations. But can I? Cygames is the parent company, or Cyber Agent is the parent company of Cygames. If I click on Nitro Plus here, let's see, Rusty Rabbit was a while ago. Doll's Nest. Well, it's no surprise I don't recognize it. Token Rambu Warriors. These are all very Japanese games. Most of which I would assume did not make a splash in the West, at least. The original Resident Evil is now available on Good Old Games, with Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis coming soon. This cover art really shows you the difference on what zombies are in the Resident Evil game versus what they were originally being depicted as. This is a much more just traditional zombie creature, whereas particularly by the time you get to Resident Evil 4, you are finding humanoid zombie-like creatures that really are nothing like a normal zombie story. Yep. Little Big Planet Adventure Twin Sins Quest launches this fall for all consoles and PC, which I tried to play Little Big Planet, but I think it was, well, if I must be thinking of a different game, because Little Big Planet did not look anything like this, but whatever. This on its own does look somewhat interesting. It's funny, to move back and forward and close, I am literally doing like the Catholic crossing of yourself in the gestures, because I'm going to the right to left, then up down, and then left to right. That was not the intention by any means, it's just happened to work that way. Wolfang / Skullfang Saturn Tribute Boosted has been announced for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. No Steam Link yet, though. Infogrames acquired Surgeon Simulator. We talked about that before. Cowboy Life simulation game Cattle Country has been announced for PC, which I don't know how that is much different than just an average Stardew Valley clone, but whatever. I imagine there is somebody worth looking at that. And then Strange Scaffold has announced a dark incremental narrative game called Click Holding for PC, although it has been written here very much like it is spelled as cuckolding, which, yeah, it might be more interesting to me if there was a game based around the story of cuckolding, and there are obviously adult games that are around that fetish. It's perhaps not a hugely well appreciated fetish. It does feel like you are effectively just clicking while this guy is watching you click, like a cuckolding scenario, where in cuckolding you would be sleeping with the guy's wife or girlfriend while he watches in the corner. It is probably a joke game, though. But it's a joke game that bothered to put out a press release, so it deserves at least a little bit more attention because of that. A medieval first-person action-adventure RPG called Alka-Heist has been announced for consoles and PC. Yeah. We're in a funny situation because nothing has really changed since to make it now much different than the first 6 months of 2024, but it just feels like desperation is increasing as we approach the end of the year and people start moving into the idea of buying games. And so I feel slightly more generous on what games are worth highlighting and making a YouTube short on, when if I was being more critical I would have eliminated more and just really admitted that we're still very much in a video game drought. Even though there's been a bunch of announcements for games, there's still very few that have actually been released. Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds Ultimate launches February 13th. And yeah, we're still very much in a case where there is a decent number of people who won't play any kind of anime games or anything that even slightly looks anime. This screenshot not really matching what we were seeing up here, over here. And so that's even fewer games for that audience to play. And then there are also, I imagine, some gamers that would only play Call of Duty, and there's some gamers that would only play anime games or visual novels. Yeah, gamers in general aren't one real community that think alike or even want the same things. It is very much attracting almost everyone. Anyone that can play games, can afford to play games. That's most people. An 80s adventure movies inspired 2.5D puzzle platformer called Airy Book 2 and the Anytime Elevator has been announced for consoles and PC. It does give off a slight feel of a Bill and Ted inspiration, but the actual game looks just more like a traditional puzzle game. Now, again, I would say we are seeing, when I open these new tabs, that there is just this preload that happens to these screenshots, which adds an extra pause. Of course, once I can actually work on my macro, I'm going to try and fix this and have all these links opened by default. In fact, it probably would be more efficient to not even cover the article headlines on Gamatsu if there is just going to be a link to Steam anyways. Just not bother reading the headlines and just immediately look at the game. Viking Age turn-based strategy RPG called Norse has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Yeah. So yeah, it's not my mouse cursor stopping the highlight reel of screenshots going forward. It is literally just delaying because it thinks the images take that long to load, which maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's hard to tell consistently whether it works one way or another. Bust of Fellows Season 2 is coming to the West in 2025 for the Switch and PC. I feel like this is probably a visual novel. It's funny to have a season name to it. Let's see, yeah. To me, it seems like all the screenshots are loaded. I vaguely recall this Buster Fellow's name, so I think it's probably a fairly well-known anime. Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster has been announced, which guess that would be a good way to give you an excuse to buy Dead Rising. Here you can see what the game looked like originally. Here we can see a major upgrade in the appearance. Although in game the texture tweaks here may not be that much. Really, it may still very well be running on the same engine. The Dead Rising series in particular is going to be a weirder one. 2006, so you're talking like nearly 18 years of time has passed. 2016 was 10 years after the fact for a remaster. Inherently, Dead Rising 1 is the one that they're still trying to promote, and that I think people still have some love for, whereas every subsequent Dead Rising was less received. Turned this off, didn't I? Let me turn that back on. I would like to see perhaps just a full-on reboot instead, if they were going to do something with the Dead Rising concept. But also, I kind of feel like the Dead Rising concept needs to be sharpened to a point as far as just being a smaller game that has more of a precision thought to it, instead of a huge time waster game that is a roguelite experience that is way too big and way too long. I still, even with this new game, would have a hard time justifying spending as much time as needed to play it. I think I may have played the first game for like 5 minutes or so. That's about as far as I got, I think, at most. PlayStation Plus's monthly games lineup for July has been announced here on Gematsu, if you want to check that out. And an alleged Jet Set Radio remake screenshots and video appears online, which might as well just wait till an official confirmation or announcement comes out around that. Pokemon disqualified several trading card game illustrations contest finalists over allegedly using AI use. The Pokemon company says it will select more artists to replace those disqualified, which, yeah, this might be the first major incident of this in which we're going to have people using AI and getting caught using AI. I imagine there might have been a lot of kids in this contest and not realize that they can't use the AI. But yeah, we're gonna hear more stories like this and we'll see what happens, I guess. Amazon Prime is giving away 15 more quote free games in the run up to Prime Day, none of which are probably going to be worth using the Amazon Prime Lua service or just downloading them. But yeah, check out the list at videogameschronicle.com, which is what we're looking at as far as stories now. Atari 50 is getting an expanded edition with 39 extra games. Stellar Blade Studio is, quote, looking at a PC version but can't commit due to, quote, contractual relationship, which basically means Sony did not negotiate as the publisher any way to release a PC game, and unless and until the rights revert back to Shift Up, they are under the normal situation in which Stellar Blade effectively is owned by Sony until it makes a number of sales or whatever contract they agreed to. It might very well be the case that Sony owns Stellar Blade forever, and they could just hire a completely different company to make an update or change the Stellar Blade or otherwise make a sequel. And in a lot of ways, I kind of would think Stellar Blade was good enough that they shouldn't put too much effort into it, and they Shift Up should just move on to the next game. Inherently, from what I've heard as far as what the story is, it is a very basic RPG storyline, and Eve, while she looks pretty, doesn't seem like she is the next Bayonetta as far as a beloved character. So if they just made a new game with a new character in that same Shift Up style, they probably would do a little bit better. They could also experiment a little bit more, maybe go to fantasy instead of sci-fi on the next attempt. Steam's summer sale teases discounts on Manor Lords, Palworld, and more. Some Steam Deck models have also been discounted, but they're currently out of stock. They're also not the new OLED versions, so unless you just absolutely want a first generation Steam Deck, I would recommend not buying them anyways. Big games potentially being on sale or being teased to be on sale is not really going to help smaller and medium-sized games that go on sale more as a surprise during the summer sale. And yeah, the summer sale, I am wrong. I thought the summer sale started on July 11th, but no, it ends on July 11th. It starts tomorrow on June 27th. So throughout the entire summer sale, the Steam Decks are on sale. The hardware is on sale. So they just announced that the hardware was on sale a couple days earlier than they announced the summer sale, which is kind of weird, but okay. Well, that definitely tells me there's a low possibility of there being a new Steam Deck announced during the summer sale. But there's always a chance, I suppose. I imagine if they did announce something, it is going to be a minor refresh. Vampire Survivor Studio shares an update on its planned PlayStation release plans. Sony's submission process are, quote, taking a little longer than usual. This implies to me that either there is some new special chaos at PlayStation now that they have two new people in charge of PlayStation, or there is something censorable in Vampire Survivors that Sony wants censored. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD developer has been revealed as Skyward Sword HD studio. Nintendo previously hadn't confirmed which company was working on the project. Alright, well, I was trying to see if I could avoid taking a bathroom break today, but that's not going to happen, so I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, I found out in that little break that, which by the way, slickdeals.net was down earlier today, so hopefully they were upgrading their servers, or will upgrade their servers between now and the Steam sale tomorrow and the Amazon Prime Day sale, because they are a very decent resource for finding sales, or although perhaps there is a better website I haven't heard of that's even better. But one of their listings that made it to their front page was the game Island of Insights on Steam being available for free for the next 24 hours. Isle of Insights, ISLE of Insights, is a somewhat single player, somewhat MMO puzzle game in a 3D environment. Mixed reviews more recently, overwhelmingly positive reviews overall. So I don't know if there's been perhaps a lack of updates and they promised updates, or maybe there's just been a reevaluation of how the game performs. But free is free, so I would say check it out. Normally it sells for $20, and that is kind of a high number even for a puzzle game that has a bunch of puzzles in it. But yeah. Maybe we'll show it here in a second. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is we have the headline here from Video Games Chronicle. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD developer revealed as the Skyward Sword HD studio. Well, in the previous stream, I came down fairly hard on Nintendo, saying that they really don't want to give credit to anybody else, and that they probably don't want to give credit. And now they've given credit, so you can take that as two ways. Either you could say, well, I just had a bad take, or you could say this might be the tiniest of a window where actual pressure from mainstream video game journalism actually matters. If you have places like Video Games Chronicle or Kotaku or Gamatsu or GameDeveloper.com all republishing the same article from one source saying how Nintendo is refusing to disclose who's working on a game, that does potentially put some pressure on Nintendo and make them look like they're trying to hide something, and maybe that pressure actually did lead to them finally disclosing this. On the other hand, you could just say it was a bad take and by me and most of the game community, and that they were always going to reveal it was the Skyward Sword HD studio. Although inherently, if they were going to do that, why wouldn't they have just mentioned it in the press release when they announced Luigi's Mansion 2 HD anyways? Yeah. So this might be one of those small examples of where journalism actually can be effective in the game industry, whereas the vast majority of journalism in the game industry boils down to about nothing, and or is just acting as a way of advertising games or over advertising games. There is a delicate tight wire act that has to be done as far as, are you informing gamers as your audience about a game being announced or a game day being announced, or are you putting out 2, 3, 4 extra articles to promote the game and get people hyped about the game because the game developer and the game publisher want you to promote the game more. Square Enix shares shared the preliminary Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail patch notes. Check them out at GameDeveloper.com if you're interested. Turtle Beach has also ended their partnership with Dr. Disrespect. While I'm here, yeah, everybody is going to effectively end the relationship as an excuse. They probably don't care so much, but it's not like he's a rising star at the moment. I was wrong here. It is not Isle of Insight, it is Islands of Insight. ISLAND. In a lot of ways, it feels like it asset flipped a lot of 3D models that probably didn't need to actually be asset flipped to try to make an MMO, when it probably should have just focused more on puzzles. And I'm not sure that this wasn't a case where it was a half of an MMO game got smashed together with a bunch of puzzles at the last second. But yeah, you can see it's 66% positive in the last 30 days, whereas 81% positive overall. But at 100% off, by all means, get the game and own it. This may very well be a case where they're giving away the game for free, where it was, I believe, $20 before, to then get a higher player base and get the reviews up before the summer sale happens. Tomorrow starts. Here we can see a offline mode is going to be released on July 9th, which I feel like for puzzle games, in particular, I would want to play on an offline mode and not have other players running around potentially annoying me or spoiling things for me. Deluxe edition includes 2 costume sets, gloves, headpieces, wings, and trails, and desktop and mobile wallpapers, which that seems like that is a lot. $29.99 is the price tag down here, which is quite a lot. I also wouldn't be surprised if Talos Principle 2 is eating into the small amount of fan base that would play this game, and Riven was just released also. So you've got 3 3D puzzle games all competing amongst a fandom that's not that big. Inherently, I would like an Island of Insight 2 to come out if the puzzles are good. I'm not sure it's even consistently the same puzzles though. It may be a whole bunch of different types of puzzles, which that in itself would be different than, say, The Witness, which is what you'd probably compare it to closest. But yeah, grab it now. 10,000 puzzles. The Cracking the Cryptic YouTube people, the 2 YouTubers there that run Cracking the Cryptic, made some footage playing this, but I'm not sure they got particularly that far. I don't think they solved all 10,000 puzzles in a long collection of live streams or anything like that, which I still am doing Sudoku and watching Cracking the Cryptic, but increasingly I'm just finding the puzzles harder. I think I'm getting worse at them, not better, or I'm getting better perhaps at giving up on things that I have no chance of finishing. A lot of times in the past week or so, I have just gotten bored after 20 minutes and just skipped to the end of the videos, not even really caring to be explained as to how the puzzle was solved. Almost all the puzzles of Sudoku variants they play on Cracking the Cryptic have one trick at the beginning called the break-in, is what they usually call it. And if you don't get that one trick, you're just doomed to not be able to solve the puzzle. And even at that, the break-in often is not succinct enough for it to matter. It's a lot of times it's just a lot of work and a lot of process of elimination. Yeah, and I don't have anything really more I want to say about Dr. Disrespect. I didn't want to talk about him a week ago. I don't want to talk about him now, and I never wanted to talk about him. The thing that always irritated me when I saw Dr. Disrespect is it seemed like he was just another, like, dude bro type streamer in a ridiculous getup, and that's all I could really say about him just by seeing him for one screenshot, which is as much time as I've ever really given him. I guess the closest thing is he feels kind of like Angry Joe does, in the sense that Angry Joe is a content creator that is supposed to review games, but he definitely just, I don't think, is that interesting in his reviews to me. So he feels like he's just trying to front or do all the checklist things you would think you would want to do to be a game reviewer without really having as much knowledge about games or actual passion about games. And I might totally be wrong about that, but that's how I always felt when looking at the Angry Joe reviews, is that it felt like it was very scripted these days. Maybe it wasn't originally, and that he's just pretending to be angry. And we know the angry video game nerd is definitely that he barely knew anything about games at all and was being scripted video game reviews originally, and nowadays he's still probably being scripted video game review parts. Well, we actually know at least some of that was true because some of the scripts were caught to be plagiarism. Mortal Kombat 1 DLC could include a T-1000, Conan the Barbarian. A data mine suggests that would be 2 likenesses of Arnold Schwarzenegger, which that does highlight an interesting thought as far as 3D scanning the body of the current Arnold Schwarzenegger is not really going to get you the form and physique of Arnold Schwarzenegger decades ago when he was in the Conan the Barbarian movie or playing T-1000 in Terminator 1 or Terminator 2. Now in those cases I believe they've probably already 3D scanned and then touched up a 3D model just for use in the movies. But yeah, I don't know if they would hand over those models to a game company, although they probably would, because I bet Terminator 1 and 2 are also Warner Brother movies, and Mortal Kombat is WB Games, so that would kind of make a lot of sense. Forza Horizon 4 is going to be delisted later this year. We already talked about that. From Software says there's interest in an Elden Ring adaptation. A film is one possibility, according to the studio president Hidetake Miyazaki. It's important to remember that allegedly George R.R. Martin wrote some of the story for the main game. I'm not sure he did anything from the DLC, so it would be the snake eating its own tail if a TV novelist, more a TV producer than even a novelist, since he didn't finish the Game of Thrones books. It'd be funny if he made a game and then it went back to being a TV series or became a film. Although, for me, I find it hard to believe a film would be made when the story around Elden Ring is just not really reaching me. As somebody who hasn't played the game, like, I have no idea what the world is, or nobody has ever really talked about what the narrative or story is. Unfortunately, I don't get recommended on YouTube a lot of deep dives that explain the lore of games, and there probably should be more of that I seek out. But you know, if there is a deep lore, which I imagine there probably is, it is just being overwhelmed by a game that seems like it is just the next Dark Souls game, and seems to have a fandom of players who just want to play it like a Dark Souls generic game without really caring about the characters or the story. Perhaps there's a functional reason for that, in that if you make a game where the vast majority of play characters are your enemies, all the NPC characters are enemies, and they just attack you and you just kill them, well, then you can't really have a great amount of story around that, can you? I'm not sure there are any friends or companions or shopkeepers or anybody of interest in Elden Ring. In comparison to like Dark Souls, I know there was the spirit of a wolf that had some kind of tragic backstory in Dark Souls, and yeah, I know people kind of got hyped about that, but then also the wolf character just dies, and then that's that. You move on. Video Games Chronicle has an analysis trying to figure out who's working on Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which is yet another game that Nintendo seems to have been less likely to fully admit who's on it. They seem to have gotten some more details, though. In particular, there's a full list here. There was a picture that I saw on Reddit of somebody who worked on like God of War Ragnarok, and he's pointing at the credits in the game on a TV, and the caption is, "Now my family knows what I do for a living." And I've said in the past, there needs to be somebody who makes a website that's like IMDb for video game credits, and that would be like the perfect type of image to have as your advertisement. It's just somebody pointing to their names on the credits. Of course, you'd either license that image or you'd make your own. You'd probably make your own and just hire an artist to do it, but yeah. If I had the energy, time, and money, I'd actually make that a project I'd actually pursue to make an IMDb. And I know at a certain level, there's a long list here, I would probably, you'd be able to get most of the credits just from the Giant Bomb wiki already, as far as game developers. No, I wouldn't be surprised if I would make the website just like licensing that information or purchasing that information to start with, but having a website that is more of a professional focused LinkedIn type aspect to it, and that it isn't really trying to target or attract gamers as much as the primary customer or end user, would make a lot more sense. Like, I wouldn't want to make a video game developer IMDb and then have just a bunch of ads from Square Enix selling Final Fantasy on the side of it. I would want it to be more of a LinkedIn type website where if there must be ads, they will be ads for resume preparation and talent scouts and things like that. And yes, gamers would be welcome to look and check out their information, and there might be even a gamer mode specifically for gamers that would scan your Steam ID in the games you own and create a unique cloud map or star topography map of different developers based on the games you played. But first and foremost, yeah, I'd want it to be about actual game developers wanting to come to the site fairly regularly, wanting to update their portfolio references regularly, possibly uploading their resumes and their portfolios regularly, and setting the record straight. And I'd want it to be very strong against any kind of lawsuits from companies that are denying that employees worked on the game, or any claims that they're implying people didn't work on the game, which inherently I would have to assume we would have to do some kind of verification where you'd have to give a screenshot of a paycheck or an ID badge or something. Moving on though, I'm kind of rambling on an idea that's likely never going to actually happen. WWE's 2K24 Post Malone and Friends DLC arrives today. This might actually have been yesterday or the day before. Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster was announced. In a lot of ways, this may just be bringing the game to run on new platforms and doing a minimal visual remaster. July's PlayStation Plus Essential games have also been revealed. It includes Borderlands 3, NHL 24, Among Us, and the exclusive Genshin Impact pack, which, yeah. I haven't played Borderlands 3, although I think I own it. I haven't played Borderlands pre-sequel. Yeah, and that would be the next game chronologically to play. It probably makes some sense to get people playing Borderlands 3, since it's probably a long enough game that will line up with the Borderlands movie. Patent reveals what Xbox's game streaming device might have looked like. Particularly if Microsoft was going to make a streaming only device, that would have been a perfect time to get away from the Xbox branding, or in part get away from generic box like devices in the first place. They don't have to be that sharp edged. You could curve it up, put some curves into it. Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone patch notes detail today's Season 4 Reloaded update. And I think on my main window, that is everything. Unfortunately, it's probably not everything overall, because my macro is jumping around to different windows when it's launching, and I have no idea why that is the case. It is totally a situation that should not be happening. Although, what we may find out here is that this is just the exact same news articles, and if that is the case, this might be new. Street Fighter 6 kicks off Year 2 DLC with the release of M. Bison. So that may have been the only one. What am I supposed to take from that? That there was one tab that was not duplicated when I ran the macro the second time. Well, one thing is not like the others, so it would imply to me that I had already opened that tab on my main window. And I think that's what might be happening here, is it may be that the macro's working well enough, but the anti-duplication feature that was added and built into Firefox may be working too well, and so when I'm adding a duplicate in a second window, it might be jumping me to the duplicate window in the first window. Well, these are just older stories. Well, the good news here is that means there wasn't any new news otherwise to deal with. So we are ending this stream exactly where I'd like it to end. Starting this stream at the wrong time, but not going super long. That being said, I do have a decent amount of Yu-Gi-Oh! I need to play, but I don't see any reason to sit here in silence and play it on a live stream. That might be a thought to do for something to do later, where I would just mute my mic and then let the stream go even longer. But frankly, if I was going to do that, I would have to know that there was just a lot of people watching if I was going to do that. It isn't the worst thought to just end the recording though, and then live stream Yu-Gi-Oh! After the news happens. I'll have to think about that some more. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.